Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the podcast you come to when you're finally ready to take fantasy hockey seriously. My name is Groot Nibbelink. I'm the creator of Apples Ginos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. In this podcast, my guest and I are going to talk about some of the biggest hot shots and have nots over the last couple of weeks. Let's get it. Well, there's no Blake Creamer here tonight, but I do have fan favorite Jason Chen here with me. Jason is the host of the Sleeper and Keepers Fantasy Hockey Podcast and the fantasy writer over at the Hockey News. Jason, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Happy to fill in for Blake. If I can bring half the energy he brings, I think we're in a good spot.
Absolutely. Well, we had a great run last year. I think we did a Puzzling Players episode last year. And just talk through a bunch of players as requested by the people and did it live on YouTube. But this one, we're going to get into some interesting players. We have a Nico Hischier sighting on the year. He's finally woken up from his slumber, so that's going to be fun to talk about. But I think off the top, we will get into some Newsies. And first one's a doozy. Adam Fox, week to week, upper body injury. And yeah, it might be 2-3 weeks at this point is the early prognosis. But most interesting here for fantasy managers who have some interest in these forwards, the Rangers ran a 5-forward power play in his absence. And it was Will Cooley who came out as the fifth, not Alexis Lafreniere for the people at home. What do you think, Jason? Do you think that was just a function of, it was in-game and they just decided this was the best thing in-game, or do you think they'll actually toy with this 5-forward power play while Fox is out?
I think it's both. I think it's a function of the in-game adjustment that they had to make. But you can't replace Fox. And if your other options are Braden Schneider and Scott Morrow to run the point, I'm not sure that's a big step up, and I think the Rangers would probably run 5 forwards instead. Will Cooley's actually been pretty good there at times. Lafreniere is a really perplexing player to me, but I think the Rangers go with 5 forwards, but I don't doubt that they'll play around with it, depending on which defenseman they dress game in and game out.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a spot where I would expect some playing around with it if it works. Like, if they come out in the next game and there's 2 power play goals, then yeah, they'll probably go with it for a bit. If it doesn't seem to work, or if they give up a shorthanded goal and it seems like the forwards don't know how to play defense, then yeah, we could see somebody come out, even if it's not the optimal thing for the purpose of scoring goals. They might decide that they need a real defenseman back there. But either way, I think you got to be interested in what this might do. But yeah, even the fact that Cooley's there, I wouldn't even be so sure that he's going to hang on to that. Even if it's not another defenseman, it could be Lafreniere. We've seen them play between Trocheck, Cooley, and Lafreniere at times throughout the season already. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting and it's a good spot for Will Cooley at the moment, but I wouldn't be surprised if it changes up pretty quickly as well.
The one sort of point I'd like to make too is that, like, it's hard to find a forward who can play that point well.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the Rangers roster, I'm not sure who you'd put there because it seems everyone's kind of set in their spot on the power play. So back in Vancouver, JT Miller could, play the top sometimes, but that was always Quinn Hughes' spot. But I mean, do you play Panarin there? I feel like it's a waste for him to play make from that far from the net.
Yeah.
Zibanejad is big, Cooley's big, Trocheck is big. So ideally, maybe you want those guys down low. So it'll be really interesting, I think, to see what the Rangers do.
For sure. All right, let's head over to Utah. Logan Cooley took a pretty nasty knee from Alexei Toropchenko on Saturday, but the early word is they believe it's just a quad contusion, nothing structural with the knee. He is going to have an MRI to check, but yeah, that was the early word. Hopefully, that's all that it is. Over in Columbus, Kirill Marchenko skated on his own before practice here on Sunday, and Captain Boone Jenner continues to work his way back. Neither are likely for the Columbus Monday game here, but they could be back in the lineup as soon as Thursday versus the Red Wings. Braden Point continues to be allegedly day to day, but it looks like he's going to continue to miss games. He didn't play any over the weekend, and John Cooper called him dicey for the Lightning's next game, which isn't until Tuesday here. So, yeah, undisclosed injuries always give me a bit of the heebie jeebies, and it doesn't seem like we're going to get any clarity anytime soon. Teuvo Teravainen was game time decision here on Sunday versus Anaheim, but did play. So good to see him back in the lineup and back on power play. And then Oliver Ekman-Larsson, player we're going to talk about in depth a little bit later, but he didn't finish the game here on Saturday due to an upper body injury. Now, Craig Berube didn't seem to think it was serious. The Leafs were winning handily already at the time when the injury occurred, so it might have just been a bit preventative. They didn't think they needed him for the rest of the game, so they let him go. But something to monitor, especially if you are interested in OEL in your league after we talk about him a little more here. And some news here on Sunday. Petr Mrazek left the game against Chicago here today with a lower body injury. Looked like he tweaked something in his left leg or knee. And that means that the Ducks already down Lucas Dostal are down to Ville Husso and probably, and I hope I'm going to get this name right, Vyacheslav Buteyets, who started this year in the ECHL. Jason, in your deepest league, can I interest you in some Ville Husso?
No.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I can't get behind Ville Husso. I've seen him enough. It's kind of like the Eric Comrie situation where like you have a really good team in front of you, but if your goaltending is not good, you might get me a win, but I'm not going to get a good save percentage or a good goals against. And I think that just puts a lot of pressure on my goaltending, and it makes me nervous every time I start him. I'd rather not deal with it. I don't think Husso's ceiling is very high.
Yeah, and all that's coming up this week is Utah, Washington, Dallas, and Carolina. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at San Jose. I was going to say that would be an absolute murderous
Yeah.
row, but Anaheim's got St. Louis, so maybe that one's not so bad. But then they do have Utah and Washington and Chicago, who looked pretty fantastic today. Connor Bedard getting stuff done there. So, yeah, definitely not going to be the easiest run of games for Husso either up ahead. So, something to keep an eye on, I guess, in your deepest league, but going to be pretty tough for Ville Husso to do something. Anaheim, not exactly known for defense this year either. It's all about that high flying offensive game, which is fun for fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
not so fun for a third string goaltender being forced into a lot of starts. And lastly, here, didn't make it in time for the slides, but Carter Hart got called up, likely to make his start Tuesday versus Chicago, according to Kevin Weeks, just before we started recording here. So that's of note. That probably puts your Akira Schmid stocks on notice if you are still hanging on to him. So, yeah, the Vegas net is about to get even more murky. And Aiden Hill, there's still been basically nothing that I've seen about him. The last we heard is probably going to be in December sometime. And if they're calling up more guys, it seems unlikely that it's going to be anytime soon. So that's the Vegas net for you at the moment. But I think we've made it through all the news, Jason. Why don't we get into some hot shots? And as I alluded to earlier, off the top, we got to talk about Nico Hischier. I have Nico Hischier in a couple of spots this year, and it was pretty brutal hanging on to him this whole time. Just actually baffling. I couldn't understand what was going on, but he's finally awoken from his hibernation. 5 goals, 10 points in his last 5 games, almost 21 minutes a night in that time frame. What do you think about Hischier rest of season? Is he just kind of back to where you think he was, where you kind of had him projected at the beginning of the year? Do you think this is indicative of something even better potentially for the rest of the season? Where do we stand with Nico Hischier now?
I think Hishier's a point per game player. It's just kind of weird how he gets there. So if you
Yeah.
go back to last year, there was actually, if you remember, a 10-game stretch where he didn't score a single goal. So as much as he's a point per game player, it kind of comes in bunches. And if I remember correctly, that 10-game goalless streak came in November. So if you have Heishier, maybe November's the month where you bench him, because it just seems like there's that first couple months, there's a stretch where he just can't get going. I still like him as a fantasy player. It's hard for me to see him anything more than like 80 points, maybe 200 shots.
Hmm.
But that's still really solid. Even with Jack Hughes out, I think that's where he's going to end up.
Yeah, I think that I mean, the minutes are definitely going to be there with Hughes out.
Mhm.
They're definitely going to give him all that run. Over the last 5 games here, 108th in shots per 60, 83rd in individual expected goals for per 60, and 61st in on ice expected goals for per 60. Not like elite numbers, but pretty good numbers for sure. So a lot of this has been efficiency, and he's now on a 30 goal, 75-point pace on the season. He's still only got a 62% IPP, shooting just under 16%, on ice shooting percentage at 13%. Yeah, it kind of just feels like it's all kind of leveled out a little bit for Heischer now. If you look at the season numbers, they kind of start to make sense a little bit more as to where he's at. And yeah, I think realistically at this point, I'm kind of projecting him the way I expected at the beginning of the season. He does feel like a pretty reliable player on the whole. Just the way that he
Yeah.
gets there for you, it might be a little infuriating in terms of your decisions on sit starts. All right, next up, Zachary Bolduc, who has a couple of goals and 6 points in his last five, just under 16 minutes average time on ice, but has gotten a promotion to line one power play one there in Montreal alongside Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. What do we think about Bolduc? Montreal's got a nice little schedule going on this week where they play Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Saturday, Sunday. So 4 games this week for them, and you get a good look at them with the Tuesday, Wednesday back to back, and you can kind of decide what to do with them from there if you do want to pick them up. So, what do you think about Bolduc in this new deployment in Montreal?
It's obviously good for him, but I don't think I'm buying his stock right now. I'm just kind of skeptical. Um, I think that third spot with Caulfield and Suzuki will always have a rotating cast depending on what Marty St. Louis does and how the Habs, are playing at the moment. They're a bit streaky.
Mm-hmm.
Short term, I like the deployment. Long term, I'm not sure I would be holding Bolduc for the entire season just yet.
Yeah, I think it's definitely still like 1 game at a time. We don't
Mhm,
know how long this deployment may last. Like,
mhm.
I mean, by the time this podcast comes out, they could have some new lines in practice and we could be talking
Yeah.
about a different situation for Bolduc altogether. I do think that it's worth noting, like, this is the spot, the bumper spot on the power play where he did some damage last year
Mhm.
for St. Louis. So that part seems to make some sense. He can set up in the middle there. Obviously, you got Suzuki and Caulfield on the flanks, and you got Slavkovsky as the big body in front. And obviously, Lane Hudson is going to do his thing, dancing from the blue line and getting the puck around all these guys. So I think, like, theoretically, it makes a lot of sense. I know the fans probably want Demidov on that top power play, but if you're going to have Suzuki and Caulfield on opposite walls, then that's probably where you want Demidov most of the time. So unless you're going to change your formation and take Slavkovsky out of the net front and just kind of run things more along the outside of the zone on the power play, then I think this does actually make a fair bit of sense power play wise. And if he's going to score some goals while playing on that line at even strength, then it could turn into something that lasts. So I think this is a good week, just schedule wise, to take a ride with Bolduc and see how that Tuesday, Wednesday goes, see how the deployment holds or doesn't. If the deployment goes away, then yeah, I'm not interested in hanging on to him. It really is a deployment dependent play for me, but I
Mhm.
am interested to see if he could solidify himself in that role, at least for a time. I don't think you need to lock yourself in for the full season at this point, but if he's going to get that role for a bit, I am interested. 42nd in on ice expected goals for over the last 5 games for Bolduc here. Next up, we have Carter Verhaeghe, another guy who's had a tough start to the season, but has broken through a little bit in the last little bit. 2 goals, 6 points in 5 games for him. Just under 18 minutes average time on ice. 111th in shots per 60, 161st in individual expected goals for per 60, but 48th in on ice expected goals for per 60 there for Verhaeghe. This is a guy that I've liked in the past a lot. He was playing on a line with Sam Bennett and AJ Greer, which is kind of an odd one for sure. But yeah, he's on that top power play unit with Marchand, Reinhardt, and Lundell up front. That's not a bad place to be on the power play. Do we think that Verhaeghe can mount a bit of a comeback this year, or are you adjusting expectations lower from where everybody thought he'd be at the beginning of the season?
I'm definitely more bullish on Verhaeghe than I was at the beginning of the season. I do think there's a lot of room for him to bounce back. But long term, it is kind of concerning that his shooting percentage has dropped so much, even last for starting from the previous season. I think the problem with the Panthers too is that they don't have Matthew Tkachuk. So once he comes back, I think there will be a trickle down effect. I
Mm-hmm.
think it'll open a lot of space and opportunities for them. I would buy Carter Verhaeghe stock right now, just because I don't think it's been this low in quite some time. I know he's been sort of drafted and dropped in certain leagues. 55% rostered on Yahoo. Just for the shot volume alone, I feel like he still has a lot of value. It's just a matter of efficiency and finishing for him.
Yeah, to that point, 7% shooting percentage on the season, which would be definitely a new low for him.
Yeah,
Guy who's lived at not quite, but close to double that for most of his
yeah.
career. So, yeah, I think the smart money on the season is that he should do better, but it is, like you said, it's definitely a different Florida team without Kachuk, without Barkov there. And so even when Kachuk comes back, is Verhaeghe going to be the guy who gets the Kachuk exposure on the other side of that line? Does that bump him off the top power play? There's still some questions there with Verhaeghe, but definitely it's a guy, if he got dropped in my league, I would be interested in taking a look at him because we do have some pedigree there. I don't think he's forgotten how to play hockey at this point, but I will say as well, I do feel some concern just because of the length of time that we've been seeing this from Verhaeghe. He had a tough year
Mhm.
last year, starts this year tough. This latest 5 game stretch is nice, and I hope it continues into something more long term. But I'm going to need to see a little bit more. Willing to jump on it while it's hot here, but I would also be willing to move off it if if he kind of returns and falls back on some tougher times in the future. All right, over to Nashville. Luke Evangelista is a guy I've been talking about a little bit because he's been popping under the hood, and the numbers are coming through to back it up. 2 goals and 7 points in his last five, just under 18 minutes average time on ice, 19th in shots per 60, down at 153rd in individual expected goals for per 60. So some of those have definitely been coming from range, but he's also 51st in on ice expected goals for per 60, getting some good deployment, starting to play in the top six a lot more regularly. Was playing on the Stamkos O'Reilly line in their latest game against the Jets and playing on the Bunting Wood Halla power play unit. So definitely it's not the primary unit there, but he's been able to put up some points here, and it does feel like Nashville needs his offense, and they need him to kind of be a guy. Obviously, 7 points for every 5 games. We don't expect that for the rest of the season from Evangelista, but do you have some optimism that this is a guy that could be fantasy relevant, at least as a streamer, for the rest of the season?
As a streamer, definitely, but Nashville tends to be like a low ceiling offensive team for me.
Yeah.
And anytime you have Ryan O'Reilly leading your team in scoring, you're not good offensively.
Yeah.
Philip Forsberg's been a little bit of an underperformer. He's always the gem in this lineup.
Mhm.
But I do like Evangelista and the deployment, as you said, because um, it's hard to not play him there, just given how the roster looks. But you do wonder how many scoring chances they can generate as a whole.
Yeah, I think that Nashville's been a little bit better about that. Um, like the team's scoring chances are there. I think it might just be more so a lack of finishing talent. Like Stamkos, for whatever reason, has forgotten how to score. Maybe it is the system, but it seems like some of the chances are there. They're just not converting as well as they had in years past. Like going back to like the Matt Duchene times and the
Mhm.
year that Forsberg really popped off and Yossi was popping off. Maybe it is just, Yossi's a little bit older. Stamkos hasn't been able to thrive in a new system here. Maybe it is just a little bit of a function of efficiency rather than volume. But if Evangelista can kind of be a piece that ups that efficiency, then maybe it helps some of the other guys get going as well. Hopefully, this is a sign of things to come for Evangelista. The underlines have looked pretty solid for a little bit here, and I'm hopeful that this can be a sign of things to come. I don't think he's going to end up being a guy that like sticks on your roster for the entirety of the season here, but I do think that he's going to be a guy that we're going to bring up pretty regularly whenever Nashville has a good schedule.
Yeah. And they're also missing Jonathan Marchessault.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they don't have a lot of playmaking centers. Like, you might as well
Sure.
say they have no centers outside of O'Reilly anyway to set guys up. So it's just going to be hard for them to score.
For sure. Yeah, let's move over to Tampa Bay, where Darren Radish has made everybody completely forget about Victor Hedman's existence with a goal and 8 points in his last 5 games, back-to-back 3-point games over the weekend, and getting the minutes to boot, just under 23 minutes average time on ice in this stretch, 34th amongst defensemen in shots per 60, 19th in individual expected goals for per 60, and 8th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. Radish had some shine last year too, got some power play one time last year too, but he never was getting the even strength minutes to really back it up. And it seems like this year Cooper has finally kind of turned the keys over to him as a at least top 4 defenseman in the lineup, and it really does seem like he's thriving. What do you think the outlook is for Radish on the season here?
I think if Victor Hedman ever goes out, which seems to be like an annual thing now, Darren Radish should be your first pickup. He's done this before. He's going to keep doing it. I think the Tampa defense is a little thinner than last year, and that's why I think Cooper has to play Radish all those minutes. But if you have Radish on your roster, you're really happy with how it's going. He's going to be that power play. I don't see anyone else on that team who might challenge him. I mean, maybe Charlie Destus or JJ Moser, but I think Radish has that spot on lockdown right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. Moser seems to be like their PK specialist, their even strength shutdown kind of guy, and then Radish is providing the offense. Yeah, I mean, the lineup they ran out there in the last game was Radish and Moser were playing together. Dustu was playing with Lilleberg, and then they were playing Steven Santini and Declan Carlisle as the third pair there. So they're definitely down a few defensemen at this point, and that just means that Radish is gonna by necessity get some run at even strength as well as on that top power play. I'm kind of thinking about this to myself, like Radish has been so good, especially on that power play, that I'm starting to wonder if he can supplant Hedman on that power play, especially if they have other injuries through the lineup. Like, Hedman is going to come back and eat a ton of even strength minutes when he comes back, that's for sure. But will they then decide to do kind of what they're doing with Moser, where he's kind of being the even strength and the PK guy? You know, Hedman's going to have those roles when he's back. Do you think there's any chance that Radish hangs on to power play one once Hedman is back?
I kind of doubt it just because John Cooper runs his top guys pretty hard. They're not saying it won't happen, but historically it hasn't. And I don't think Hedman's slowed down to the point where, you have to sort of load management him. Granted, the injuries are sort of becoming an issue, but I just don't see it quite yet. If Radish does stay on that power play, though, he's going to have a lot of fantasy value for the rest of the season.
Yeah. I definitely think it's a spot where I'm not going to drop Radish the second that I see Hedman's coming back, right? I'm going to at least see that game, maybe a couple games before I make that decision, because I think there's at least a chance. And yeah, it's been money so far wherever you've had him. He's been great. The underlying numbers have all looked terrific as long as he's been there. And honestly, the offense for Tampa at least has looked even better with Hedman out of the lineup, which doesn't make any logical sense, but that's the way it's gone. And so maybe Radish has played himself into the power play one conversation at least.
There's no way with a team with a lineup like that should be like the second or third best team in the league right now over the past month. It's just, it's insane to me.
Yeah, the John Cooper effect is alive and well there in Tampa for sure. All right, last one here. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, as you mentioned, got a little bit banged up over the weekend, so something to keep an eye on if you are thinking about picking him up. He's over 50% rostered already in Yahoo because he's been on, I think it's a 9-game point streak at this point for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He's got 2 goals and 6 points in his last 5, averaging well over 20 minutes a night, even including that game that he left early. 54th shots per 60, 39th individual expected goals for per 60, and 83rd in on ice expected goals for per 60. Not getting that top power play run. The Leafs have actually gone to a 5 forward power play the last couple of games here, which is pretty interesting in its own right. But Ekman Larsson's on a 13 goal, 66 point pace on the season. The Leafs have dealt with their own injury issues on the back end, and that's meant a lot of extra minutes for Ekman Larsson, a lot of, late in the game when they're trying to come back minutes as one of the offensive defensemen on the team alongside Morgan Riley. Do you think that Oliver Ekman Larsson can be like just a run of the mill fourth defenseman on your fantasy lineup for the rest of the year if this holds?
For sure. I think even though the Leafs power play has struggled, I still like him more than Morgan Riley on that power play. And as long as you're on that power play, and Ekman Larsson was like the power play quarterback when he was with the Coyotes, right? So he's been there before. But there just aren't that many power play quarterbacks who can put up points. And even if you are a power play quarterback, there are some who don't put up any points. So I do like Ekman Larsson for the rest of the season. I think there will be times where Riley finds his way back on power play one, just because when you have a bad power play, the coaches will try to change things up to spark it once in a while. But I do like him for the rest of the season. The shot volume could be a little bit better, but I think he gets enough peripherals, and he's obviously scoring enough points for me to say, yeah, I'll take him as a depth defenseman, especially in deeper leagues. I don't think you can go wrong.
Yeah. I think he's got a pretty solid floor, especially with the injuries they've been dealing with. If they get fully healthy, then probably he dips back down around that 20-minute mark, maybe a little bit below, depending on who he's playing with at even strength. But I think Ekman Larsson, I think actually Berube has definitely given him and Riley especially a bit more of a green light on the offensive side of things this year than he did last year. And that's just meant better numbers for both of them to this point in the season, regardless of who's running the top power play. So, yeah, I think there's at least a pretty solid chance. Like, I don't think he's going to continue this 66-point pace, but could I see him being a 45-point defenseman at the end of the year and he's actually kind of maintained that pace? I think that's definitely possible. Something to monitor once they get fully healthy for sure, what it looks like, where the deployment's coming from, what the even strength stuff looks like. But I'm not going to say no at this point. I think things have materially changed enough for him there in Toronto where he definitely could be a season-long hold. All right. Well, as we do in the middle of the episode here, going to take a brief moment to plug the Apples Ginos Patreon. $2 a month gets you Apples Ginos Patron League eligibility, which at this point in the season means we put you on the wait list for a team that might go abandoned at some point this year. The Apples tier, $8 a month Canadian, gets you that APL eligibility. Also gets you access to patron-only Discord channels and live shows once per month. Gets you access to the show notes, including the show notes for this episode right here. Also gets you access to the Apples and Ginos player evaluation tool, which will show you cool stuff like this about Luke Evangelista and what he's been able to do in the last 5 games on the season, kind of compare some stats that way, give you the 82 game pace, all the stuff that we talk about here on the podcast you'll be able to see for whichever player you want. All right, Jason, are you ready to dig into some have-nots?
Let's go.
All right, have-nots off the top. Going to be Nick Schmaltz. Now, Nick Schmaltz had a just torrid start to the season. Everything was going right for him, like 100-point pace at one point early in the season, and that has completely fallen off a cliff at this point. Clayton Keller has cooled down some, but Nick Schmaltz has gone absolutely glacial. All the great underlying stats that were there at the beginning of the season have taken a similar nosedive off the nearest cliff, 235th in shots per 60. Still up there, like decent range at 66th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. Even with the great start, he's now on a 32-goal, 69-point pace, which I guess is pretty nice, but it's definitely nothing like where he was at the beginning of the year. So now that we've had, 26 games of Nick Schmaltz so far, Jason, what do you think about the rest of the season point pace?
I think he probably ends up with another 60-point season. He's kind of like clockwork. I find him kind of like a Nico Hischier where, he'll score in bunches or he'll go for periods where he doesn't do a whole lot. But at the end of the season, he kind of ends up where you think he'd be. I think Nick Schmaltz's fantasy value comes from the fact that for whatever reason, people forget about him all the time.
Yeah.
So like he always gets overlooked in drafts, but within the first month he suddenly gets picked up because he's racking up the points. That being said, the rest of the season, 40 points over the next 60 or so games, that's not bad. That's still worth rostering, but definitely not going to keep up this torrid pace, especially if like Cooley is out. I know it opens up a little more ice time for Schmaltz, but that offense definitely takes a hit if Cooley misses time.
Yeah, for sure. They might even split up some of the players to try to give
Mhm,
Gunther somebody else to play with, because Gunther and Cooley have played together for most of the
mhm,
season. So, yeah, you could definitely see it just kind of have a negative trickle down effect on the lineup overall. I mean, part of this for me, like I have Schmaltz in a place, and it's not the deepest league. It's not the toughest league that I play in either. And so I was looking at Nick Schmaltz and how little he's done in the last little bit, and I was wondering whether I should be dropping him. And I was looking at the schedule, and they play San Jose, they play Ville Husso and the Anaheim Ducks there on Wednesday. They play Vancouver, and they play Calgary at the end of the week. And I'm like, I think I can get on board with Nick Schmaltz, line one, power play one, 20 minutes a night for the rest of this
mhm.
week while he's got a great schedule, all off nights to start the week. So I think that's what I'm going to do personally. I'm going to give him this week at least and see where it goes. I do tend to agree. I think over the course of the season, he's going to be in that 60, might get up to 70 in a good year kind of point range.
Mhm.
And he's getting good minutes this year, especially. Don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So, in general, I think Nick Schmaltz is a good player on your roster over the course of the season. Do you have to necessarily roster him even when he's ice cold, as he tends to be at some points? Definitely not. But I think that more often than not, you're going to be happy to have Nick Schmaltz on your roster.
One other thing about Schmaltz is that historically he's been pretty good against the Ducks and the Sharks,
Yeah,
like almost point per game against them. So that always bodes well.
it does bode well. Might have something to do with the fact that the Sharks and the Ducks have been pretty terrible
Yeah,
for the last
terrible.
few
That's right.
years
That's
as
right.
well.
Like sometimes you look at it and you're like, well, it's not the same team, right? From 2, 3 seasons ago. But I do think there's certain teams that some players do really well against.
For sure. All right, let's head over to Pittsburgh. Another guy who had a great start and has since kind of fallen off a bit, Evgeny Malkin. Just one goal in his last 5 games now, under 18 minutes average time on ice. Still 80th in shots per 60, which is pretty respectable, but down at 207th in individual expected goals for per 60 and 230th in on ice expected goals for per 60. He's now on a 20 goal, 82 point pace for the season. What do we think about Malkin at this point? It feels like we kind of had this last year where he was super hot for a bit, but he was also like ice cold for a long stretch, got bumped off the top power play, spent a lot of the year on the second power play unit. And at this point, I'm not sure. Like, it was a nice story while he was rocking everybody's world with Anthony Mantha and Justin Brazeau, but you always had the question about how sustainable that was.
Mhm.
Where are we at with Malkin now? What do you think about his rest of season prospects?
Similar to Nick Schmaltz. So Malkin, as you said last year, you had the same thing where he started off pretty hot and then kind of cooled off.
Hmm.
Um, at his age, to be this productive is still quite like a feather in your hat.
Hmm.
I know Brazo's been hurt, but I think Malkin ends up around the same area where he's, 60 points, 150 shots or thereabouts, and averaging about 17, 18 minutes per game. That might change if Pittsburgh changes course during the season, like if they want to go for the playoffs or if they want to start selling. But that's what you'd expect from Gino at this point in his career. It's one of those things where, like at his age, I feel like he's just going to slow down as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think that's a definite possibility here. 65% IPP on the season, just a 9.8% shooting percentage, but a 16.4% on ice shooting percentage. That's the part that's going to continue to come on down. And so, yeah, I think I'm with you there. Rest of season, probably putting him at roughly a 60-point pace. And yeah, always a chance that Pittsburgh, if they start to fall off, if they start to go quiet a bit, that they might enter full on sell mode and they ship
Mhm.
out Russ, they ship out Raquel, and he's back. And all of a sudden, that power play looks even less potent,
Mhm.
and Malkin may suffer a little bit on that front as well. So something to keep an eye on with Malkin for sure. Hopefully you sold high on him if you had him while he was rocking in the early part of the season and you're reaping the rewards there. All right, over to Vegas, where we got Pavel Dorofeyev down to just one assist in his last 5 games here. Still just over 17 minutes, average time on ice. 128th in shots per 60, 72nd individual expected goals for per 60, and 45th in on ice expected goals for per 60. Still a piece of that 5 forward power play there in Vegas, but down to a 36 goal, 56 point pace on the season is Dorofeyev. I think with the hot start that he had, we had some hopes that he was going to cash in on that 40 plus goal potential. He was going to play with Mitch Marner all year. He's going to play on the top power play all year. He's going to get 18 plus minutes a night. That doesn't seem to be coming to fruition. Do you think that Dorofeyev is a full season hold still, or are you having him trending back more towards streamer status?
I'd still probably hold on to him for a full season because I still think he's going to hit 30 goals. If you have Dorofeyev on your roster, you're never looking for assists anyway. You're looking at
Mm-hmm.
goals and power play goals and
Mm-hmm.
shots if you count that. I still think he provides that. At 16%, I mean, he's right where he should be. He just was way too hot to start the season at like 27%. So
Mm-hmm.
he's come back down to earth a little bit. I think that'll normalize. I just think power play goals are hard to find. So I'll probably stash him on the bench if I have to, but I'm not at the point where I drop him.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. It's worth noting that with, Braden Bowman kind of entering the conversation here, the Golden Knights have kind of split up the top 9 and really made it into more of a top 9
Mm-hmm.
here. So it's been Barbashev, Eichel, Bowman. Mark Stone back in the lineup has been playing with Marner and Brett Howden. And then it's been Hurdle Dorofeyev as the pair with Alexander Holtz on the other side. So it's just meant that, what you were hoping for with a really defined top 6 and really top heavy minutes has not really come to fruition at even strength. Still a big piece of that power play. I think him being cold on the power play over the last little bit is just a little bit of a cold streak, a little bit of a blip that we won't remember when it comes to the end of the season. But yeah, if you're looking at a 36 goal, 56 point pace on the season, that kind of feels right about where he should be to me. And I wouldn't be too surprised if he ends up there. It would be nice if he could add a little bit more playmaking to the repertoire here and push himself over that kind of 60 point mark and be in that 35 to 40 goal range over 60 points. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily in the cards with this iteration of the Golden Knights. All right, another player on Utah who's been struggling to score as of late, JJ Peterka, just 1 goal in his last 5, just over 16 minutes average time on ice, 102nd in shots per 60, but 24th in individual expected goals for per 60 and 23rd in on ice expected goals for per 60 is Peterka. Obviously, we know the talent of this player, but it doesn't really seem like the role is there for him in Utah, at least to this point. So, what can we expect from JJ Peterka moving forward, Jason?
I thought he kind of overachieved in Buffalo last season. I think you're looking at a 50-point player, but if you look at the landscape these days, 50 points isn't, like it's not at a point where you have to roster in fantasy. I just think on the Mammoth, there's too many mouths to feed. So if you look at the depth chart, he's maybe the third or fourth guy on that list. So I mean, in a deeper league, yeah, you keep him around, but he's in a more shallow league. I think he's kind of closer to streaming status. He
Yeah.
just doesn't get enough ice time for me to be really confident in him.
Yeah, I tend to agree with all of that. I think that Paterka was a guy who people were really excited about as a sleeper a year ago, and then it kind of hit, and everybody got really excited, and we're like, oh, this guy is a total stud. He goes to a new situation, and those are always a bit 50-50. Sometimes it works out really well, and sometimes a player will take a step back. And just because it doesn't even have to be something about the player, it can just be a new situation and a new role on a new team. And so, yeah, this was a player I had a 25 goal, 55 point projection on at the beginning of the season, and I got roundly cursed out by a lot of people for that. But yeah, I kind of feel like this might just be what we should expect from Paterka in this role. And, if he was getting consistent line one, power play one, I did see in the last game he was playing with Schmaltz and Keller,
Mhm.
which would obviously be a much more interesting place for him long term if he could stay there. But he's still not getting power play one. I think he's behind, like Logan Cooley wasn't even on the top power play. They had Barrett Hayton up there. So it feels like there's like multiple steps or multiple injuries that have to happen before Paterka
Mhm.
is even considered for power play one at this point, and that's just going to cap his upside for fantasy purposes. Like I think that we just have to be a little bit realistic with ourselves and think of him a bit more as this 55-point player on the Mammoth as currently constructed. All right, Vince Dunn is next up here. Just a goal in the last 5 games, no assists to speak of. Just under 23 minutes average time on ice for Vince Dunn. And I was looking at his fantasy points. It's just been pretty underwhelming this year for Vince Dunn. He's not really been more than like a fourth defenseman on your fantasy roster in like a 12-team league. And this week, the Kraken only have 2 games. They play on the Thursday and the Saturday heavy nights. Is this a week where people should consider letting Vince Dunn go and moving to a streamer in that spot? Or do you still think Vince Dunn can pull things back together rest of season?
I think Vince Dunn's like a 40-point player in a decent season. Um, I probably drop him in a 2-game week just because I don't think he brings enough on a per game basis for me to roster him. If I'm picking a Seattle defenseman, especially as a streaming option, I actually prefer Brandon Montour, just because he tends to shoot the puck a bit more wild, I guess, in terms of playing style, which is also kind of great for fantasy.
Yeah.
And Seattle to me has always been a low ceiling offensive team.
Yeah.
I don't really like rostering any of their players unless I really have to. Although Jared McCann's back, so maybe that brings a little something back to their offense. But he's been battling injuries all season, so I'm not quite sure. I'm convinced that they'll be that much better.
Yeah, Jared McCann comes back. Jaden Schwartz goes out. So, yeah, I think McCann's a better player than Schwartz, but by how much? And will that materially change the entire Seattle
Mm-hmm.
offense? Right? It's hard to say that for sure. On the season, Dunn is pacing for 14 goals and 44 points, which is still pretty solid. His underlines look pretty good on the season, but as you mentioned, it's hard to get excited about anybody in Seattle this year. I think Dunn is a player that I'm still holding, unless like somebody's just out there. Like if Radish is still hanging out there on your
Mm-hmm.
waiver wire, then for sure, yeah, I would make that swap. If Dunn is your worst defenseman currently and Radish is still out there, then yeah, I would do that. But if you're talking about Dunn versus like the Matthias Ekholms of the world, even the Oliver Ekman Larsons of the world, I still don't know if I'd make that move. It feels like a bit of a lateral move with
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of higher end upside for Ekman Larson, where I think in a best case scenario, Vince Dunn could be a 50 plus point defenseman on the season, or at least pace for the rest of the season. So, yeah, I still like Vince Dunn, the player. I just don't know if we're going to get the best version of him this year in this iteration of the Seattle offense, which is maybe something we should have seen coming. But yeah, it's definitely not the best spot.
I think as a whole, they're a bit better than they were last year,
Mm-hmm.
but offensively challenged because they still don't have that superstar offensive player unless Beniers or Wright or even Berkeley can make a huge leap.
Right. Yeah, I think they definitely are at least one superstar caliber player away from, yeah, just kind of revitalizing that offense
Mm-hmm.
in a material way. All right, last one here. Hampus Lindholm, no points in his last 5. Normally, we would not be talking about Hampus Lindholm in the have not section, but yeah, we kind of, at least I thought that Hampus Lindholm would be a little bit better. He's been the guy to get the power play one in the absence of Charlie McAvoy. McAvoy's not going to return anytime soon after some pretty terrible facial reconstruction surgery after taking that puck to the face there, what is it, a couple weeks ago now. But anyway, Hampus Lindholm getting all the minutes in the world, over 24 and a half minutes average time on ice, getting that top power play. The Bruins power play has been pretty good, which we'll examine in depth a little bit later on here. But yeah, the points aren't coming, and I'm curious if you think that Lindholm, like, let's put him right in that conversation with all the guys we were talking about, with Vince Dunn, with Oliver Ekman Larson. Where does he rank in that for you? Do you think this is a blip and he should get a little bit better? Do you think Lindholm is just kind of offensively challenged himself and he's just kind of a placeholder on that top power play? Where does he fall for you at this point?
Out of all those guys you mentioned, I'd probably have him at the bottom of the list.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's kind of weird that outside of Charlie McAvoy, it doesn't matter who the Bruins play on the top power play. No one produces.
Yeah.
If Yoki Haru was healthy, I think maybe he'd get the nod and maybe he'd get some more points. But Lindholm, to me, is a guy who could maybe put up points, but his job on that power play is probably just to keep the puck in and give it to the other four guys. It is a little surprising that he's produced nothing at all. But I just don't see a lot of production even when times are good.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree there. I did think that with the power play going the way it was, with him just getting an insane amount of ice time all the
Mhm.
time, that he would be able to run into something, maybe just be like even like a 40-point pace guy while McAvoy was out and be at
Mhm.
least fantasy relevant as like a fourth guy on your roster.
Mhm.
I'm obviously less convinced of that now, but I think he's probably like, again, if you're comparing him to maybe the Matthias Ekholms and below of the world, the guys who aren't on a power play one somewhere
Mhm.
else, like I think that's the at least the tier that he probably belongs in, right? Is
Yeah, fair.
the guys that are not on a power play one somewhere else versus Hampus Lindholm on a power play one. That's probably where I'm putting him. And yeah, it's probably a bit more of a schedule dependent play for me at this point. It is worth noting, though, that, new coach in town with Marco Sturm, and he goes to Hampus Lindholm. Last year, they went to Mason Lowry. Obviously, Lindholm was out last year, but it's not Lowry who gets that look this year. Yeah, it could be Yokoharu, as you mentioned, as well, who might even get another look if Lindholm continues to struggle and Yokoharu makes his way back. But yeah, definitely not what we were hoping for from Hampus Lindholm, given the power play one deployment so far. All right, let's continue moving things along and talk about the environment. This is a section of the show where we talk about just the environment that we find these fantasy players in and what it might mean for some of these players, what it might mean for some of these teams, and what we can project for them moving forward. We've done a lot about 5v5 stuff. Want to dig in on some of the top power plays across the league to date so far. Number one, as you can see on the screen here, if you're watching on YouTube, is the Dallas Stars. Now, these stats were taken before today's game. I think they notched a couple more power play goals there on Ottawa today. But the Dallas Stars were clicking at 31.8%, good for first in the league. Last year, 2024-25, they were down at 17th, 22%. Obviously, there's some big changes that the Stars have undergone. They add Mikko Rantanen. Obviously, that impact can't be understated. They're also finally using a true number one unit, which I think is actually a pretty big effect. When a lot of teams do this for the first time, it actually is a pretty big effect. I think it's pretty underrated how important that is. I think it just gives a unit a lot more time to find their rhythm and to figure out what they want to do to even in game to like figure out what the penalty kill is offering them and what they're taking away and to find the right places to attack it. I think good players on good teams are able to do that in game even. I think that's just super important for top power plays around the league to just get comfortable. So, what do you think about the Dallas Stars so far this year, Jason? Obviously, 31.8%, that would be, I think, a record in the modern era if they managed to keep that up over the course of the full season. But what do you think about them rest of the season? Do you expect them to continue as, say, a top five unit all year, or do you think there might be some regression coming?
Well, this is the reason they hired Glenn Gulletson, right?
Hmm.
So I think they can do this. I think they have the personnel to do this.
Hmm.
I'd be kind of surprised if they didn't keep this up because of the amount of talent they have. I think the one thing that did surprise me is Heiskanen over
Yeah.
Harley. I was a big Harley guy coming into the season.
Hmm.
And if you told me that Heiskanen would be the clear cut number one guy, granted Harley's injured, but if you had told me that beginning of the season, I wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah.
But I have no problems with this Stars offense or their power play. I think they're the biggest challenger to the Avs as the second best team in the league, and it's unfortunate that they'll probably meet in like the first or second round of the playoffs because we have this
Yeah.
horde format that right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's another conversation altogether. But yeah, I love the Stars power play. Have no notes for them.
Yeah, and honestly, I tend to agree. I think they can keep up. if not the number one power play in the league, definitely top five rest of
Mhm.
season. Honestly, I think they could switch Harley out for Heiskanen and it would probably look just as good, even if they decide to make that move for whatever reason at some point in the season. I think it would be just as good with him there. And yeah, everybody just seems to be clicking there. Everybody's got the role, everybody's doing the thing at this point in time. And I don't see any reason under the hood for them to really change the usage, change any of the players on there, or change really how efficient they've been. Like I said, 31.8% probably doesn't last all year long, but definitely a really high efficiency is what we should expect. They are third amongst all teams in shots per 60, first in scoring chances for per 60, and second in shooting percentage. When you have, again, using the exact same guys all the time, giving them all that time to get used to each other, to figure out how they want to attack all these different penalty kills. Heiskanen, Robertson, Rantanen, Johnston, and Hintz all 70% power play share or more on the season. That's I haven't checked all 31 other teams, but I'm willing to bet there are not a lot of other teams with that high of a percentage for the same five players. So definitely a spot where I think it's pretty sustainable at this point in time. Number two on the list is Pittsburgh, which might be a little surprising for people. 30.4% on the season. In 2024-25, they were sixth with 25.8%. So they're kind of continuing where they left off last year. I mean, right off the top, you have Sidney Crosby. Your power play probably should be pretty good. And if it isn't, that's probably a you problem as a coach and not a Sidney Crosby problem. But they have kind of done it this year with some different people. As I mentioned before, Malkin was not on the top power play for a good chunk of last year. He's back on this unit, and it hasn't been a problem. It's been pretty good, obviously. And Ben Kindle, I don't actually know how to say his name. I've said it both ways, I'm pretty sure, throughout the course of the season. One that I continue to say I'll look up and then never do. But he's not a passenger either on this power play. He is actually contributing and, yeah, making it better than it would be without him, I think. This is another spot where they're 7th in shots per 60, 11th in scoring chances for per 60, 3rd in shooting percentage. They might drop back a little bit from this spot. They might be more of a top 10 unit than a top 5 unit rest of season. I could see that. But I honestly think that this is a good spot. The coaching staff seems to have things dialed in. They're not changing what isn't broken, and things are clicking along. How do you see it, Jason? Do you see this any differently, or do you feel like they can keep this up as well?
I generally agree with you. I don't know if they're a top 5 unit for the rest of the season, but I think it'd be hard for me to see them drop out of the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've at least tried to, or they've moved away from forcing Carlson and Letang to play together.
Yeah.
So I think that's helped a little bit. The one thing that does kind of worry me about the Penguins' power play is that they actually don't draw a lot of penalties. So
Mm-hmm.
69 penalties drawn so far this year. That's the lowest in the league. Just means you're not going to get a lot of opportunities, which means anytime you score or don't score, that percentage is going to fluctuate quite a bit.
Yeah.
But so far, I have no concerns with this power play. When you have Crosby and Malkin and guys who played together for this long, generally the chemistry is built in. It's like riding a bike. It's hard for them to be bad, even if they wanted to, I think.
Yeah. Totally agree there. One other power play I wanted to highlight from this list. I mean, we have some of the teams we definitely expected to be here. The Oilers are third at 30.2%. You've got the Wild in here, 24.2%. Vegas, 24.1%. New Jersey, 23.8%. Montreal, Chicago, reprising their great power play from a year ago, and Ottawa, right about where they were last year as well. But one that's pretty surprising is the Boston Bruins at fourth on the list at 25.3%. Boston was 29th last year, 15.2%. So they're clicking a full 10% better than they were last year. The unit that they were using was Pasta, Geeky, Zaka, McAvoy, and Elias Lindholm. Obviously, McAvoy's out, and we have seen when Lindholm was out, Elias Lindholm was out, it was Victor Arvidsson who's on that top power play. So we've kind of seen the next man up, for both forwards and defense with Arvidsson and Hampus Lindholm here. Now, Pasternak and Geeky both have 5 goals on the power play each. Elias Lindholm, even though he's missed a bunch of time, also has 4 goals on this power play. What do you think about the Bruins so far? It's been a pretty big part of their success early on in the season. What percentage of this do you think is sustainable?
Of all the power plays you talked about, I feel like this one's the least sustainable. Um, I think the numbers are okay. I think sometimes they go on a shooting percentage binge.
Mm,
But I do think Morgan Geeky retains a lot of fantasy value for the rest of the season. I think we're done being unsure about him.
mhm.
And then if you have pasta there, it's going to be good. We did talk about Hampus Lindholm. I'm not sure he's going to move the needle either way. So long as he can keep the puck in, I and
Yeah.
and and walk the line, I think they'll be okay. If they finish with a borderline top 10 power play, I think that's still pretty good.
Yeah. I think exactly what you said. I think of the group that we've talked about, this is definitely the one that's most likely to regress. And to your point about Hampus Lindholm, McAvoy was the least effective member of this power play, just had
Mhm.
5 assists amongst all the others who all had at least 8 points or more. So I don't think he has to, set the world on fire. He just has to distribute the puck. Obviously, put it on Pasternak's stick, and he's going to take care of the rest more times than not. But they are 16th in shots per 60, 20th in scoring chances for per 60, but 6th in shooting percentage, which obviously kind of suggests that they've been getting a little bit more lucky than
Mhm.
good so far in the season. To what extent is definitely a conversation that can be had. Geeky, the year that he's having, how much of that is sustainable? He's scored 20 goals in 27 games so far, 61 goal pace. I don't think that's going to keep up for the season. I don't think he's going to continue to shoot 29% for the year, but it's worth noting that this is definitely a role for him that's working. And he's got David Pasternak there. It's hard to overstate how good Pasternak has been in this iteration of the Bruins where they don't have a lot of other elite talent alongside him, and he's just raising the bar for everybody on that unit. And Pavel Zacha having the year that he's having as much more of a distributor with those two guys as the obvious shooters, and Elias Lindholm having a little bit of bounce back on the power play too. I think all of that combined, I would probably, if you set the line at like 10.5 over under in terms of power play rank for the rest of the season, I think I would still take I guess that'd be the over. I think they're going to be outside the top 10 rest of season on the power play. I think they have run pretty hot here. And so that will definitely affect some fantasy relevance for a guy like Pavel Zacha, especially. Elias Lindholm has been kind of a streamer level guy in a lot of leagues. And so I do think that that falls off a bit here. So it's just something to watch for and to continue to see if Boston can continue to click. The Lindholm change is one thing, but can they continue to find the back of the net with this much regularity? What happens when the shooting percentage comes for Morgan Geeky specifically, and what does that do on this power play? I think that's all things that I would be concerned about if I was rostering some Boston players at the moment. All right, let's get under the hood with this week's player, who will be Gabriel Landeskog. Had to talk about Landeskog here. In the last 5 games, he's got 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, 18-11 average time on ice. Amongst all players, he's 23rd in shots per 60, 11th in individual scoring chances for per 60, 38th in individual expected goals for per 60, 95th in on-ice expected goals for per 60. The last 2 games have been especially good. 1 goal on 6 shots, 11 shot attempts, 5 individual scoring chances in 21 minutes and 13 seconds versus Minnesota. Follows that up with 2 goals and an assist on 5 shots, 7 shot attempts, 6 scoring chances in 16 minutes, 12 seconds in that blowout win against Montreal there. Finally, on the top power play unit is Gabriel Landeskog. What do you think about Landeskog's potential to kind of take that next step in terms of the deployment, in terms of the ice time? It really seemed like the training wheels were kind of on to start the season. Is this him just blowing that off and saying, I'm here now, and we should expect something a little more akin to the Landeskog of old?
Um, I'm really intrigued by this because I'm there's a part of me that thinks that the Avs really eased him into the season. Like they
Mm-hmm.
really didn't give him a lot of time. He wasn't producing a whole lot. These past few games have opened my eyes a little bit. I'm not sure he's going to get back to where he was before.
Right.
Just because I don't know, it seems like such a serious injury, and this is already one of the greatest comeback stories, right,
Yeah,
in
for sure.
history. And the fact that he played 21 minutes against Minnesota was really, really interesting to me. The fact that he's getting so much ice time on a team that plays really fast is interesting to me. I
Hmm.
do think, though, that because Nichushkin is out, because the Avs don't play their bottom six a lot, I think that helps Landeskog get more ice time.
Yeah.
And the more he produces, the more ice time he's going to get because I think Bednar just trusts him a lot more. Um, I would pick up Landeskog as like more of a speculative ad, knowing that like maybe a month or two from now I could still end up dropping him. But I like what I've seen so far for sure. He's maybe the most intriguing player on the wire right now.
Yeah. For me, I am really interested in Landeskog. We have, the proof of concept. The rate stats have been pretty good for Landeskog
Mhm.
throughout. It's more been about this time on ice and what is he going to get in terms of that time on ice. Is he ever going to be that kind of line one, power play one player again? We're seeing the power play one right now. Line one is always a possibility. Like, obviously, the
Mhm.
Avalanche, that top line, Lehkonen, McKinnon, Natchez, has just been so good. There's been no reason to change it or toy with it, even. And so that just isn't in the cards right now. At some point throughout the season, I mean, I don't think the Avs are just going to like never lose a game for the rest of the season. At some point, they'll probably have their own cold streak. And at that point, they might break up that top line. And Landeskog would be kind of the logical guy to go up on that top line with McKinnon and Hs. And so that would obviously be just absolute rocket ships for his fantasy potential at that point. 28% rostered on Yahoo right now. Gabriel Landeskog, I think you at least have to take the swing right now with him, especially if you got open spots on those heavy days that he's playing this week. If you can fit him in your lineup, I think this is a week you got to take a ride with Landeskog and see where it takes you, because the potential for him to, just be not even a guy who's just giving you a 70-point pace, but a guy who can contribute like the shots, the hits, the blocks. Like, he's going to be a physically involved player no matter where he's playing in the lineup. And if the minutes are there, then that's really going to accentuate his fantasy profile. All right, lastly, here, a little bit of business. We have to take care of the head-to-head streamer deathmatch. We are tied 3-3, Blake and I, heading into this week. And Blake took Claude Giroux, and I took Braden Bowman. And we have our first ever tie. Both players scored 11.6 APL fantasy points, which has never happened before in the history of the head-to-head streamer deathmatch. So we are now 3-3-1, I guess, at this point, which is yeah, pretty interesting. Next week, Blake took Zachary Bolduc and I took Landeskog, so we'll see how that pans out over the course of the season. At this point, Jason, I just want to say thanks for coming on. This was a great chat. I know the people love to hear perspectives outside of mine and Blake's whenever we can get somebody else on the pod who's as knowledgeable about fantasy hockey as you are. The people really love it. So why don't you take this moment, tell the people where they can find all your great work.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. It's been great to be back. It's always nice to talk to you guys as well. So on X/Twitter, you can find me at jasonchen16.com. You can also find the Monday column, the weekly schedule primer. That's usually published Sunday evenings at thn.com/fantasy. I have a partner. His name is Jan Levine. We do have daily articles that recommend some streamers on every game day. So please be sure to check that out. We also have the Sleepers and Keepers Fantasy Hockey Podcast that Nate mentioned earlier. You can find that on Spotify. It's been great. Thanks for having me. It's always nice to chat and nice to debate a few players. You always have some really interesting ideas going on.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, Jason. Always great to have you. That is going to be all that we've got for this episode. Hopefully, it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick and 18 Skaters. Many thanks to Matt Creamer for supplying the music for the podcast. That's it, folks. Much love.